The sources, lead is a heavy metal and it's used in both occupational and non-occupational sources. So the main source is from the environment and gasoline. And although the drinking waters are made from the lead pipes, chewing gums, and the lead paints on toys, etc. So it's used in various industries. Why? Because of its low cost, anti-corrosive action, and it's easily oxidized, and it mixes with other metals easily to form alloys. So how much storage does the lead in the body is seen? The body store is 150 to 400 milligrams, and the clinical symptoms are seen when it is more than 70 milligram per 100 ml in the blood. So the blood level is 25, but whenever it crosses beyond 70, that's when you see the clinical symptoms. And the normal adult can ingest up to zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3 milligram of lead per day. So how does the distribution occur? Once you ingest this lead and all, though 95% of it goes out to the feces, the remaining percent is being absorbed and it goes into the circulation, and when it attaches with the erythrocytes and it causes and kidney and then into the bone, so leading to renal failure and hepatic disorders and along with bone deposition. So after the ingestion, the absorption occurs and it goes into the circulation, and then it attaches with the erythrocytes and it redistributes into the liver and the kidney and then into the bones. So what do you call lead poisoning? It's called plumbism. So all lead compounds are toxic. Most dangerous are lead arsenate, lead oxide, and lead carbonate. And the least toxic is lead sulfide. And it occurs in three ways: the inhalational, which is the most common, and the ingestion, and through the skin. So then lead combines with the essential sulfidyl groups of certain enzymes. It goes to the erythrocytes with the help of the erythrocytes. It increases the permeability and it leads to potassium leakage. So the hypokalemia and the secondary hypokalemic changes leading to weakness and arrhythmias. So what are the early symptoms of the lead poisoning that you will be seeing? So the early symptoms are fatigue, headache, irritability, and the metallic taste, and the uneasy of stomach, and the poor appetite, weight loss, and the reproductive problems. So these will be the early symptoms: headache, irritability, poor appetite, weight loss, and the reproductive problems. So what are the clinical features that you will be seeing? You will be seeing an colicky abdominal pain and constipation, loss of appetite, blue lines on the gums. So this is an important point. In the lead poisoning, you will be seeing blue lines on gums and stippling of red cells. So the two important points that you should be remembering whenever you write about the lead poisoning is blue lines on gums and the stippling of red cells, or you can also call as and then you will be seeing anemia, wrist drop, and foot drop. Though the other clinical features are seen, these two are characteristic of the lead poisoning and should be remembered: the blue lines on the gums and stippling of red cells. So organic lead compounds, the toxic effects can be mainly on CNS. So what will you be seeing is insomnia, headache, mental confusion, and delirium. So how do you want to diagnose? So diagnosis is mostly through history, upon his occupation or what he was doing or how the ingestion could be, and then depending on the clinical features and the laboratory diagnosis. So the coproporphyrin in urine, it's normally less than 150 milligram per liter, but whenever it's more than 150, you can suspect lead poisoning. And the aminolevulinic acid in the urine, being more than 5 milligrams per liter, is one of the features. So the two laboratory diagnoses are coproporphyrin in urine, which is normally it's less than 150 milligram per liter, and whereas aminolevulinic acid in the urine, which is more than 5 milligrams per liter, will give you a diagnosis. So the 2 points when you write about the diagnosis and investigation, these two should be mentioned. Important. And the lead in blood in urine. So in urine, it's more than 0.8 milligram per liter, and in blood more than 70 milligram per 100 ml. As we discussed previously, it indicates lead absorption. and there is basophilic stippling of RBC. So this one point we were discussing previously. Stippling of red cells is seen. It is called as basophilic stippling. So the basophilic stippling of the RBC, and with the lead presence of lead in the blood and urine. In urine, it should be more than 0.8 milligram per liter, and in blood, it should be more than 70 microgram per 100 ml. Because the normal value being less than 25, and when there is an ingestion or absorption or lead poisoning through some way, and there is presence of more than 70 microgram per 100 ml, along with corpoporphyrin levels in the urine being increased more than 150, and aminolevulinic acid in the urine being more than 5 milligrams per liter, then you can be suspecting the lead poison. So upon deposition on the bones, you will be seeing dense metaphyseal lines. Here you can see in the aroma, the dense metaphyseal line, epiphysis, metaphysis. This is a metaphyseal signs, and the dense metaphyseal lines are seen, which is a characteristic finding of lead poisoning. So the characteristic findings, I'll again say it once again. Whenever there is a lead poisoning, you'll be seeing blue lines on the gums, along with the stippling of red cells, and the corpoporphyrin levels being increased, and aminolevulinic acid in the urine being more than 5 milligrams per liter, and the basophilic stippling of RBC, and the presence of dense metaphyseal lines on X-ray in the large joints. So how do you want to manage? The first thing is to prevent the further absorption and to remove the lead from the soft tissues. And the second is to prevent the recurrence. So how do you want to treat? Saline purge. So it removes the lead from the gut. So once the saline purge is done, the gut, whatever the lead is available in the gut is being removed. So the absorption decreases and the redistribution into the kidneys and the liver decreases. So as I was saying, because of the redistribution into the hepatic and the kidneys, it leads to renal failure and AKI, and ultimately patients may end up in CKD. And the hepatic failure may, on long standing, may result in cirrhosis. And the treatment here we are discussing, it leads to saline purge, which will lead to removal of lead from the gut. And whereas the D-penicillamine, the chelating agent, is used to promote the lead excretion in the urine. So other substitution, the lead compound should be substituted by less toxic materials. In the isolation, lead dust or fumes should be enclosed and segregated, and the local exhaust ventilator to remove dust and fumes. So in working atmosphere, the lead concentration should be less than 2 milligrams, and the personal hygiene and periodic medical examination of the workers who are exposed to the lead should be done. And the other points are, because of the involvement of the renal, the kidney, there will be an renal failure, and ultimately patient may end up in chronic kidney disease. So the patients who end up in chronic kidney disease may require dialysis for the excretion. So I'll again just come again with a few important points in lead. So it's a very low cost anti-corrosive metal, so it's used in various industries, and the body stores is between 150 to 400 milligram, and the clinical symptoms is seen only when the blood levels is more than 70 microgram per 100 ml in the blood, and the normal adult can ingest up to 0.2 to 0.3 milligram of the lead per day. And the distribution, it's an ingestion, absorption with the help of the erythrocytes when it leads into liver and kidney and then into the bones. And the lead poisoning, we call it as plumbism. And with the essential sulfhydryl group, certain enzymes, it increases in permeability and leads to potassium leakage. And the potassium leakage, due to the hypokalemia, it leads to generalized weakness and arrhythmias. And the early symptoms, mostly it's headache and irritability. And whereas the poor appetite, weight loss, and reproductive problems are also seen. In the clinical features, two important points that you should be remembering is blue lines on gums and the stippling of the red cells. The two important points, blue lines on gums and the stippling of the red cells, along with anemia, wrist drop, and foot drop. And the CNS effects is mostly insomnia, headache, mental confusion, and delirium. And the other clinical features would be due to the involvement of the kidney, the patient may present or may end up in chronic kidney disease in the later stages. Or repeated exposure to the lead may also lead to chronic kidney disease. So on the diagnosis, you should be doing copper-porphyrin levels in the urine, which is normally less than 150, and the aminolevulinic acid levels, which more than 5 milligrams per liter, is also one of the feature. And lead in the urine and blood is being checked. And whenever in urine it's more than 0.8 milligrams per liter, or in blood whenever it is more than 70 mg per 100 ml, or there is presence of there is presence of basophilic stippling of the RBC, then it indicates the lead absorption. And dense metaphyseal lines. Presence of dense metaphyseal lines on X-ray is one of the characteristic finding of the lead poison. And on the treatment, the stomach wash, that is saline purge, should be done to remove the lead from the gut, and the D-penicillamine should be given. So that should be enough for the lead, and we will move on to supravasmol poisoning. As the people know, supravasmol is one of the hair dye which is commonly available outside, and it is one of the most common poisoning due to the easy availability and presence. So supravasmol poisoning is emerging as a major cause of suicidal poisoning in India, as it is very cheap and it's very freely available hair dye. And it contains potential toxins like PPD, which can result in multi-organ dysfunction. So the main important constituent is paraphenyldiamine, PPD, which is presence of less than 4%. Though the other constituents such as propylene glycol, resorcinol, EDTA sodium, and few others are present, paraphenyldiamine. So whenever we are talking about supravasmol poisoning, the one constituent that everyone should remember is paraphenyldiamine, which is the most and major constituent leading to all the effects, and it leads to multi-organ dysfunction. So paraphenyldiamine is the no, come again.
Sir, supravasmol poisoning already taken, sir.
Ayipindamma? It's done?
Yes, sir, on 30th of June.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know that someone took this. Okay, I'll just go through it. We'll go about some other poisonings in the next class then. Fine?
Okay, sir.
Can you hear me? Yeah? I didn't know that supravasmol was finished. So I'll just go through it. That will be a revision for you, and we'll see. In the next class, we'll see another one. So shall I start asking your questions on supravasmol then? Now that your class is finished? I can't hear anyone. Is there? Anyone is there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'll start asking questions then. That would be easy. Or shall I just go through one revision? So whatever you want. I'll just give a revision for you. In the next class, we'll discuss about other poisons. Fine? Okay. So the paraphenyldiamine, it's metabolized by CY450 to form Brandowski base, and it's an anaphylactic, highly toxic, and strong mutagenic. And the lethal dose is 7 to 10 grams, but 3 grams is sufficient to cause systemic complications. So the 3 grams of paraphenyldiamine presence can also lead to systemic complications, whereas the lethal dose is 7 to 10 grams. And it produces both local and systemic effects. And the systemic effects are into two phases, the phase 1 and phase 2. And the phase 1 is acute presentation, that is cervicofacial edema, airway obstruction, gastritis, and severe vomiting. And whereas the phase 2, that is subacute presentation with acute renal failure, rhabdomyolysis and hemolysis, and hepatitis, and hyperkalemia, hypocalcemia, and hyperphosphatemia. And there is severe metabolic acidosis. So here you can see the phase 2 being more lethal, where you can see renal failure, rhabdomyolysis, hemolysis, and hyperkalemia, and severe metabolic acidosis secondary to the renal failure. Even 5 to 10 ml of supravasomal can cause laryngeal edema due to direct toxic effect of PPD on the membranes. And the no specific antidote is available for PPD, hence management is only symptomatic and supportive. And the development of pneumothorax is reported following laryngeal edema and intense inspiratory effect secondary to laryngeal edema leading to over distension of the alveoli. So whenever there is laryngeal edema, the patient tries to more and more to gasp the air, and it leads to alveoli over distension, and then it leads to pneumothorax. So what are the local effects? It's the skin irritation, contact dermatitis, chemosis, lacrimation, and exophthalmos, and permanent blindness. So chronic hair dye use is associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, multiple myeloma, acute leukemia, and bladder cancer. The resorcinol, it causes methemoglobinemia and renal toxicity, and the EDTA sodium, it causes hypocalcemia, propylene glycol, and EDTA sodium, it causes hypocalcemia, and the propylene glycol, it is associated with hyperosmolarity, CNS depression, and arrhythmias. So here you can see few other constituents causing their effects. Resorcinol causes methemoglobinemia and renal toxicity, whereas the EDTA sodium hypocalcemia, and the propylene glycol is associated with CNS depression and arrhythmias, and it is nephrotoxic, and it results in high anion gap metabolic acidosis and acute renal failure. Okay, this is the clinical features is angioedema or cervicofacial edema. The early manifestation include respiratory distress due to swelling of upper airway and angioedema. And the angioedema is immunologically mediated, anatomically limited, and non-pitting edema. So it's a non-pitting edema, and it's abrupt swelling of the dermis and subdermis, and it leads to sudden difficulty in respiratory distress and leading to pneumothorax later. And the stages of angioedema is first is facial and lip edema, followed by the soft palate, then the lingual, and then the laryngeal. So the four stages are the facial and lip edema, the soft palate edema, the lingual edema, and the laryngeal edema. And the rhabdomyolysis, the symptoms are back pain, limb pain, and the generalized myalgias. And acute muscle necrosis is the cause for tenderness and local edema of the muscles. And the initial sign of rhabdomyolysis is the appearance of cola-colored urine, and there is dissolution of striated muscle fibers with leakage of muscle enzymes like myoglobin and the potassium, calcium, and other intracellular constituents. So the one point you should remember here is the cola-colored urine secondary to rhabdomyolysis, and the muscle enzymes will also be leakaged along with myoglobin, potassium, calcium, and other intracellular constituents. And the creatine kinase levels are the most sensitive indicators of myocyte injury. So whenever we are talking about muscle injury, the one thing we should see the levels is the creatine kinase levels. And then the renal failure, it testifies to the severity of intoxication. And the toxic injury, it's due to the toxic injury, myoglobinuria, hemoglobinuria, and hypovolemia is seen. And the propylene glycol, as we discussed, is a nephrotoxin. The myocarditis, it's due to rhabdomyolysis of myocardium, and it's reported in 15% of cases with mortality of 29%. And the neurological symptoms are convulsions. So we have the angioedema, the first and foremost, followed by rhabdomyolysis, and then the renal failure, and it leads to myoglobinuria, hemoglobinuria, that leads to the renal the causes, and the myocarditis, it's the rhabdomyolysis of the myocardium. Due to it leads to the myocarditis, and it's reported in 15% of the cases, and the mortality is very high. And what it leads to is ventricular arrhythmias and sudden cardiac death. And the neurological symptoms are convulsions. And the cause of death, as due to the angioedema, there will be respiratory obstruction and there could be sudden death, followed by renal failure, which causes renal CKD, the chronic kidney disease, which leads to the secondary effects and leading to death, and the arrhythmia secondary to myocarditis and the ARDS. So someone can tell me the treatment then, now that it's finished, or shall I start asking by your names? Is anyone going to respond now? Okay, I'll start asking by the names then. What is this? Sindhuja. Who is Sindhuja? Number 116. Can you tell me the treatment? Are you there, Sindhuja? I can't hear you. Is someone there? If there's someone there, then I can ask you questions, or else then I think no one will get the attendance. So no one is going to respond to me. Is someone there, or else shall I stop the?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, who is this? What's your name?
Kavya Shreya, sir.
Okay, can you tell me the treatment? Now that the class
Sir,
is finished. Yeah.
gastric lavage within 1 hour, sir. Airway
Okay.
can be maintained by tracheostomy or endotracheal intubation.
Okay.
And steroids can be given. In life-threatening conditions, epinephrine can be given. And dialysis, cardiac monitoring using ECG, and arrhythmias should be treated, sir.
Very good. Very good. So was it the same PPT that previous to the class was done? No?
Maybe
Okay, I'll
same
just
PPT, sir.
okay. Then I'll just go through it. The steroids, you'll be giving the hydrocortisone, that is 200 mg stat, followed by 100 mg for every 6th hourly. If not responded to hydrocortisone, then methylprednisolone should be given. This is after the gastric lavage, as you said. That should be done within 1 hour of the injection, but it's contraindicated if the airway protective reflex is lost. So this is one thing you should remember whenever you're doing gastric lavage in the hair dye conditions, the poisoning. Because of the angioedema, you cannot do the gastric lavage also in these conditions. So the airway protection is more important. And the laryngeal edema, it should be done with endotracheal intubation and tracheostomy. So, though the gastric lavage is very important, because if angioedema develops in this patient, the first thing you should be going and doing is the endotracheal intubation and the tracheostomy. Then you can go for the gastric lavage or whatever you want to do, steroids or the next. So, epinephrine may be needed to stabilize the patient, and aggressive fluid resuscitation, because the renal injury leads to AKI, and isotonic fluids to restore renal perfusion, and the AKI should be prevented. And the dialysis support may be life-saving when the oliguria develops. And the myocarditis, continued cardiac monitoring, and threatening arrhythmias and sudden cardiac death should be timely intervened and given treatment. And the alkaline dialysis, that is due to the metabolic acidosis, you will be seeing isotonic saline, sodium bicarbonate, and diuretics should be given. And the sodium bicarbonate should be given 8th hourly. Though the dose here is given, it depends upon the amount of the acidosis of the patient. So in conclusion, it's a life-threatening emergency which requires emergently resuscitation and aggressive management of anaphylaxis. And the preventing renal failure is very important, since its occurrence is associated with high mortality and increase in ICU stay. And the time of development of renal failure is uncertain. Hence, all the patients should be monitored in hospital for renal failure complications. So, okay then, we'll discuss about the other poisonings in the next class. I didn't know that this was already done. So, okay. Thank you.